This is Radio Sputnik.
So let's return to our top story now, where we're reporting the USA's increased bombing on Afghanistan and the resulting increasing civilian casualties. Now, to discuss this in further depth, we're joined live by Director of the Geopolitical Research Project for Commander Levin Consulting in Islamabad, Mr. Shahid Raza. Are you with us on the line, Mr. Raza?
Hello, Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us on Radio Sputnik this afternoon. Shahid, the first question. The number of civilian casualties is reported to have hit a record number for this year since the beginning of the war. I think most of us are struggling why there's been such a large increase this year. Can you account for such an increase yourself?
Just according to some reports, over 95 Afghan civilians have been killed in the US airstrikes in the past few months only. And mind you, these numbers are far from accurate. I attribute this sharp increase in Afghan civilian death toll in US airstrikes to the frustration in Washington, D.C. and Trump's own desire to win a war that started 16 years ago by all means possible. So when such mindset would be driving the force projection in Afghanistan, the civilian casualties are bound to increase. And I don't think anything can account for it, but certainly I believe this is the only rationale in Washington, D.C., and the attitude in Washington, D.C. is responsible for these civilian casualties.
Now, I think the interesting thing is that obviously with the rise of errant airstrikes, it could potentially drive a wedge between the administrations in the USA, Washington and Kabul. What's your particular take on this? Do you think there's going to be further damaging implications because of this current situation and the ongoing ties are going to be damaged now between the US and Afghanistan?
First aspect we all have got to understand is that there are two different metrics for measuring the Afghan public opinion. The first metric is to take the official press releases of the United States surrogate government in Kabul on their face value, which are designed to cushion the deaths of their own civilians they claim to represent at the hands of the U.S. forces as quote-unquote unavoidable collateral damage, and therefore undermining the true extent of these strikes in order to not agitate their only cash cow, which is, again, the U.S. government. And the second metric is the public opinion of the ordinary Afghan people, which never really makes it to mainstream media because they reject and resent the military occupation of Afghanistan by the U.S. forces to begin with, a stance not endorsed by the government in Kabul, which pretends to have control over most of Afghan territory and to represent the true Afghan opinion, both of which are false. So the only kind of wedge worthy of mention here is between the foreign forces in Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan, which not only runs as deep as it can get, but also being made worse by these airstrikes. There only can be one winner from this situation in the end, the Afghan Taliban, who would successfully brand themselves as the one and only true defenders of Afghan land, liberty, and people against the foreign forces, and also against the foreign-backed and funded government in Kabul.
Interesting what you're mentioning here. The question sort of comes to hand when I'm listening to you is, does the general public in Afghanistan have any sway whatsoever in terms of putting pressure on the government in Kabul to reduce these airstrikes? Is there anything they can do at all, or is it just basically the government is running the strategy and not going to take any kind of interaction from the public into consideration at all?
Look, there is a very short answer to this question. I would say the government in Kabul is not a democratic government. There was an election, but it does not represent the Afghan people. It was put into place by the Americans. Even Karzai was put into place after the Bonn Conference in Germany. So they don't really represent the opinion of the Afghan people because they don't really control the Afghan territory. According to recent reports, more than 45% of Afghan territory is directly controlled by the Taliban.
Okay, thanks, Shahid, for detailing that specific point. Now, if we talk and look at the specific airstrikes that have been conducted recently, information's been coming through that the districts that have been bombed are districts that the Taliban has already left or fled. How is it possible to take control over the situation and ensure that no civilian casualties occur then?
Okay, the first thing we need to understand is that the military capabilities of Afghan Air Force is extremely limited. And these airstrikes, therefore, are being conducted by the foreign forces, which are equipped with very modern equipment like the F-16s or the F-15s. Even with all of that equipment, the U.S. military relies on the Afghan forces to provide field intelligence because Americans can't differentiate between, let's say, an RPG-7 and a shovel. Therefore, the increase in civilian casualties is linked to a blend of incompetent Afghan forces on the ground and trigger-happy American pilots in the air. This situation is understandably and justifiably leading to mass discontent between Afghan civilians who already distrust the US-backed government and the US-backed Afghan National Defense Forces because most of the ANDF is made up of Northern Alliance militants who decided to help the Americans in invading their own country in 2001 and were subsequently baptized by the US and turned into the only legitimate national military. Afghanistan is a country of ethnic conflict, and when the ANDF soldiers are seen siding with the foreign forces, the local Afghan population resents it very much. This could turn into a massive challenge for ANDF because they will end up losing whatever public support they have, what they've got left, which is absolutely critical for the success of their operation. And we hear time and again about these airstrikes are unavoidable, which is partially true because of the false intelligence coming from the ground. A pilot flying at 20,000 feet only has to release his bomb load at coordinates or a laser targeting being provided by the ground intelligence operatives, right? So this situation can only be fixed if the U.S. finds a way to better train the Afghan field intelligence operatives to discriminate between militants or civilians. I will give you a very good example of this. Last year, the U.S. bombing of a civilian hospital in the city of Kunduz, killing over 45 people. The Americans later blamed their Afghan field assets for the faulty intelligence. So the answer to your question is yes, the civilian casualties can be greatly reduced, if not completely avoided, with better field intelligence, better analysis of the target area, and by being more careful about dropping bombs on people in populated areas.
Just a final question, Shahid. I mean, I'm thinking about this, and we've now gone through three U.S. administrations: the Bush administration, the Obama administration. Now we're in the latest administration with Donald Trump. I mean, these bombings, the interaction from the US and allied forces with the UK as well started back in 2001, 2002, and now 15 years on. You're an obviously experienced consultant working for your Command 11 consultancy company. I mean, what's the solution to this situation? Are we going to ever see a harmonious conclusion to this situation, or is it just unachievable?
Look, there is no happy ending to this conflict. There is only one solution, which is not acceptable to Washington. And that solution is being advocated by us. It's been advocated by the highest echelons of Pakistani intelligentsia. It's been advocated by the Pakistani government that you have to bring the Taliban to the table, really to the table, not just pretending to have negotiations and not really achieving any results. Second thing you need to do is you need to bring all of the regional powers to the table. You have to bring China, you've got to bring Russia, you've got to bring Iran, all of the countries which have direct security investments, which have direct security interests in Afghanistan. They should be part of this peace process. And if you remember, in 2001, there were two parties in Afghanistan. There was the government of Taliban in Kabul, and then there were the Northern Alliance. The Northern Alliance were defeated, and they didn't have the government in Kabul. So the U.S. sided with them. They sided with the U.S., and they eventually ended up becoming the government, but they didn't really go away. The Taliban are mainly made up of Pashtuns, who are a majority in Afghanistan. They were alienated, and it has led to an increased divide between the people and the government, right? So what should technically happen is that the entire collaborative system in Afghanistan needs to be re-engineered. You need to bring the second dimension, the Afghan Taliban, back into a political system, and they should give up violence in return. And this is only the solution which would be acceptable to regional powers like Russia, like China, Pakistan, and Iran. but it is not acceptable to the US because the primary demand of the Taliban is that the foreign forces should immediately leave Afghanistan. There should be no military occupation of their country. And only then they can have a fair and free negotiation with a political settlement in mind, which is a fair argument. But the US is very interested in Afghan mining. They're interested in the Afghan natural resources. They are interested in the location of Afghanistan in the Asian mainland and the utility, the military intelligence utility it offers to Pentagon and U.S. intelligence apparatus against these countries, like against Pakistan, against China, against Russia, against Iran. So Afghanistan is their listening post to keep tabs on all of these countries which are emerging, and they're trying to ally with each other and trying to create an Asian bloc. So there is a geopolitical backdrop to this particular scenario. And unless the U.S. actually realizes that their presence, their occupation of Afghanistan is actually making things worse, and it all comes down to what they intend to do. Do they want to give up their interest in Afghanistan? Do they want to give up on all of the natural resources they're looking for? So these two questions, in my mind, would decide the future of Afghanistan.
Okay. All right, Shahid, it's been a pleasure listening to you. I've enjoyed having this discussion with you this afternoon. We'll let you get back to your very important consultation there at Command 11. So thank you for your time on Radio Sputnik this afternoon. That was Mr. Shahid Raza, who is the director of the Geopolitical Research Project for Command 11 Consulting Group in Islamabad.